We're listening to the questionnaire.
Say that again.
You're listening to the questionnaires.
I've just started.
Right here, for your ears, for your eyes.
The questionnaire.
Get your comic on.
Poke it out, poke it out, poke it out, poke it out.
Look away from this comics, kids. It ain't for the squeamish. Yeah, but look, we try to make the questionnaire for everyone. Sometimes it doesn't work. Because, funnily enough, normally I would have thought that would have been my fault. Right? But it's not been. It's been the creators that I've had on. Right? Come on. Vladimir Popov in the house. Dude, Vlad, you can't tell me that's funny. Come on. If you look at season 1 and we switched to season 2, wouldn't you have thought I would have been the problem?
Yeah, 50-50.
See, I've got at least 50-50. But I think I've kept it cleaner than about everybody else. On, like, as far as compared to the guests, I mean, the co-hosts, everybody, and shout out to everybody, all the co-hosts on the show. It's been phenomenal, man. It really has. Vlad, obviously, is the co-host on this particular episode.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
I think I just actually got something set up to, we're going to I got an episode to set up to drop tomorrow, right? Where we're going to be talking to Doug Wagner.
You're coming in hot, yeah.
Hopefully, I get this one out.
Comic book day and a questioner day. There we go.
Man. It's we're trying to pop it off, keep it moving. You know what I mean? You got pre-show questionnaires over there at the Patreon. You can check out for being a member. That's all you got to do. You ain't even got to pay me no money. You can check out these pre-show questionnaires that get, a little bit of a pre-show interview kind of thing, like something I would equate to, like, I don't know, something you may see in Wizard. Except, look, I don't have time to personalize them all. They've changed over time. They've been different, but I send out the same one to a lot of people. Unless Vlad, you want to start filling out or making personalized questionnaires for every guest?
What? Sorry, what?
I think you want to start making out personalized questionnaires for every guest.
You want me to make questions for every guest? Well, we can do that, yeah.
I'm just saying, because there's this part of me that the more it progresses along, the more I'm like, it'd be nice to have real specific things for everyone. At the same time, I think it's interesting to learn the particular facts that we put forth about the individuals that we do. Now, in that, I want to say, I love this pre-show questionnaire. We're going to get right into it, right? We are, because he said something I'd never seen, Vlad. He did something I'd never seen. Yeah? That's Joe Corallo, right? Right, Joe?
Yeah,
how
Corallo,
you doing?
yep. You got
now,
it.
man, I want to know, what made you go Fritz the Cat?
Hey, Joe.
Hey.
Now, what made you go Fritz the Cat, Joe? That's an interesting... I've had that questionnaire out to several different people, a lot of different creators, and that question has been on there for a while, as far as in concern to comic book films.
Yeah.
Why Fritz the Cat? Yeah, I've never had that one. In probably 50 plus questionnaires, like I've not seen that in any capacity. It's intriguing. What made you go Fritz, man? And why not Garfield? Why you gotta hate on the other cat? You just don't like orange, do you?
I mean, I love Garfield. I actually own some original Garfield art. I own a strip as well as animation cells from the Christmas special of Garfield and Grandma Arbuckle. So, like, I'm all in on Garfield. I'll also say, when Garfield the movie came out the other month, I went with a group of friends to Olive Garden, and then we went and saw Garfield, the movie. So, like, I'm there with Garfield, don't get me wrong. But with Fritz the Cat, that, like, if we're talking about, number one, a comic movie that's animated, that gets a lot of points for me. It looks like the comic, and that movie, as well as the sequel, are very true to the source material. True in a way that, like, unlike almost any comic movie that has come out in decades at this point, there's this idea of like trying to make it either appropriate for some audience. This movie didn't attempt to make itself appropriate for any audience. This movie was like, we're NC-17, cool. I'm down, you're down. So like the fact that that movie did that, it is also a movie that I have seen on the big screen too. I've gone to a screening of Fritz the Cat at the IFC Center here in Manhattan. So like I've enjoyed the Fritz experience in theaters, at home, read the comics. It's for me, I think it's hard to beat in terms of staying true to the comic and producing quality work that does not care if it's appropriate for anyone.
Yeah, it was also filmed like 40 years ago in 1972. So it was like a different world, you know.
And that's the other thing.
Completely different world. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you make a very valid point, Vlad. That the Fritz the Cat film is an older film by far. You didn't have the internet and the culture that you have now, and the cancel culture that you have now, that you would have to be like. I imagine if someone tried to make.
Did you even have like Comic-Cons that much back then?
Not really, no, not in 1972. I mean, I think you were really just starting to get the idea of conventions, and they're nothing like what people would think a convention is now, or even would have thought a convention was 10, 20, 30 years ago even. Like, the conventions are completely different than when they were, you know, in like VFW halls and church basements and things like that in most of the 70s.
The creepy stuff.
But I think it's interesting, the point that you make, Joe. If you look at that, and then firstly, I love the fact that you love Garfield like that. I've watched all the Garfield movies with my boy who's 5, and including the new one, which I love, the father-son story, and for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I love your appreciation. And look, and the fact that you have original cells from the Christmas special, I will rob your house, Joe. All right, I won't really, but I'm just saying, like, if there's anything to have cells from,
I appreciate that.
If there anything, I won't, but if there's anything to have cells from, that's the one to have cells from, in my opinion, is the Christmas special. But what's your favorite comparison to the how they just did not give any regard? They made the product for what the product was. Do you think the turn in culture and the internet has made it to where people are afraid to adapt things in comics too graphically into film and TV?
Well, I mean, that existed even before then, right? Like, it was very rare to get any kind of adaptation of an underground comic, let alone a comic that graphic. And, you know, you really don't see that in general, especially, you know, I mean, like Ralph Bashki, you know, went on to do a lot of, you know, things that were of varying age ranges, you know, your Fire and Ices and also your, you know, more family friendly fare of, you know, that, he did the, was it The Hobbit and the first of those Lord of the Rings animated movies? I know he wasn't on the last one, but
he went on the first one.
Yeah, I did the first one, or like I mean, the fact that the same guy, you know, did this and some of these other things that he went on to do, and you know, the Mighty Mouse cartoon, which also absolutely fantastic, that Mighty Mouse reboot in the 80s that really paved the way for like the sort of modern idea of animation, and you know, animation done by primarily animators, that wasn't like a chop shop, that elevated the medium and allowed for things like Ren and Stimpy and, you know, what MTV did in the 90s. It kind of paved the way for liquid television, like all these things. I mean, Ralph Bashki,
Joe,
which I know is different from Robert Crumb, but
you didn't say Adult Swim, and I just had to throw that in.
True. You know, if I kept rambling, I would have eventually gotten there.
Yeah, but they're quite different. I mean, like Ren and Stimpy and Count of Chicken and those kind of shows from the 90s of Cartoon Network, they're the most similar to, you know, the Fritz the Cat and the Bakshi catalog.
Yeah.
But Adult Swim was more like a, you know, parody. I think it kind of like leans more on Mel Brooks type of parody.
Yeah, I get that.
I mean,
but yeah, I mean, Ren and Stimpy is like.
I was always a fan, and it's funny though that you bring up Mighty Mouse, Joe, because I mean, with that being done,
Bakshi worked on Mighty Mouse.
Well, yeah, because I think
the reboot in the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, I think people don't realize the effect that Mighty Mouse had on the superhero movement overall, as far as with children, and then getting them ingrained in that. You know what I mean? I don't think people have ever translated that. Look, like Mighty Mouse leads to Superman, and look, I know that's your favorite superhero now, Joe, and I respect him. I do. I used to. If you go back to where we had Fred Kennedy on, man, we had a whole discussion about it, and I've garnered a whole other amount of respect for that character, as far as for what, especially I've read some other things about Superman since I've had Fred on. Yeah. I've garnered a different opinion, because initially when I read him, I was more of a kid with a kid's mind. I don't know how else to put it. You know what I mean? That was jaded. And I think sometimes when you read characters like that, when you're in that mindset, you have a problem accepting someone that has that amount of power and still chooses to do good. Right? Yeah. So what makes that character that stand out for you even now? I'm curious. From Mighty Mouse to Superman, I mean, because there's a large link there, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure, the Mouse of Tomorrow. But you know, I mean, with when it comes to Superman, there are just so many, you know, incredible stories. The supporting cast, the way they were able to spin out all these different characters and all these different, you know, sort of series from that it was foundational in, you know, making the Fourth World work, you know, with Jack Kirby, the kind of, you know, powerful stories that were really told through. I mean, the influx of creativity in Superman over the years, and how much of it is just a staple of the whole DC universe. I mean, you don't get Legion of Superheroes, which is probably my favorite superhero team, without Superman and Superboy and all of these characters. You don't get, you know, a lot of characters who are just mainstays in the DC universe, like Lex Luthor, Brainiac, Bizarro, all of that. The Silver Age of Superman, the insane amount of creativity in a very short period of time, in just a few years within the Silver Age, and mostly predating, you know, Marvel, which, you know, really the Marvel we know it didn't happen until what, like August of 1961. So, you know, before that, you get this Silver Age Superman. Like, once the George Reeves show's done, you get the Fortress of Solitude, Supergirl, Crypto, Brainiac. You get, you know, what was it, Metallo? You know, all of these really important characters that really helped define Superman, that it's hard to imagine Superman without. You know, the Bizarro Superboy and then Bizarro Superman and all of that. Like all of that happening in a very short period of time. And then a little later, but still within the Silver Age, getting Parasite. And I would stack the first appearance of Parasite against the first appearance of just about any Marvel villain. And I think like that initial story is, you know, just as good and intricate and thoughtful.
And if you think about it, Superman established something that became the status quo within comic books, which is you have to have a nice little cavalry of villains. that all want to attack you.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can't be fighting the same person all at the same time. Otherwise, that story gets far too repetitive. So you have to have just this entourage of individuals that for some reason just don't like you, right? I still say in the modern age, Batman and Spider-Man have the best rogues gallery, like by far. I'm sorry, and if you don't agree with me, Joe, I'm sorry. And I don't know who I'd pick between those two. Honestly, probably Spider-Man because I'm more of a Marvel guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I mean, but part of that too is like the sort of proliferation of those two as having the best sort of rogues galleries, and like I think it ends up being to the detriment of a lot of other franchises. I think there's a lot of people who would say Flash. I think the idea of a rogues gallery is Flash. I do think, and again, Batman, Spider-Man have an incredible rogues gallery. Both of them. I think you end up in a situation where people focus a lot on that, and you miss out on a lot of these other really interesting rogues galleries. Like, and sometimes that's on the publisher too, right? Like sometimes the publishers need to sort of flex these rogues galleries a bit more. While for me, Hush isn't necessarily a good story, the idea of you put top talent on a book for a year and you go through that rogues gallery and you show people how like cool this rogues gallery is, I think a lot of characters would benefit from that.
Did you just say Hush isn't that good of a story?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, Joe, I agree.
Hush, the Batman villain.
Yeah, I've just
I am not complaining about the art at all. I am solely talking about the story, because the story is an excuse to have all of these rogues show up. And like,
story's key.
And I think we could use more of that. I think it would be nice, like put top talent, like get your best people, put them on a Flash storyline for a year and have the Flash fight, like really show off that rogues gallery. Do it with Captain America. Do it with, I think that kind of stuff could really help, because while I think Hush isn't necessarily a good story, it is easy to market, as we've seen. That is always going to be in print. It's going to be it's an accessible book for people to read. It's easy to just be like, hey, you want to understand Batman? Here's Batman looking great, fighting all the villains, and some you don't, but you're going to be intrigued. And I think it's a formula for printing money for some of these franchises that they should be, follow with other characters.
So, in what you just said, Joe, I'm curious. Like, because you said it wasn't a good story. Look, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I've read Hush. I was not a fan. All right? I was not. Yeah. Now, mind you, again, when I say that, I like to think, though, if I read a good comic, hey, that's what's up. It's a good comic. I don't care who it came from, where it came from. It's a good comic. I could tell you some Superman comics I've read recently. Well, I couldn't tell you the names of them. I read a lot. Whatever. Sure. Leave me alone. I'm trying to keep track of it. But there were good stories. You know what I mean? Do you think they did that just for the primary purpose of trying to get new readers, as opposed to being about readers that were already there? And maybe that's why someone like you or I don't see it as that good of a story. Excuse me, because it's supposed to be more of an introductory story to where you could bring someone in that's never picked up a comic book in their life. And I mean, look, if you're getting that story, I don't know that I want that story. I've read a lot of comic books in my life. I don't need the beginner book, right? And I'm not. I mean that's fine. If you look, and if you can write a book that's a beginner book, and I enjoy, I'm impressed. Yeah, I'm impressed.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I enjoy that isn't good. I think you can delineate that sort of thing. Like, what was it? I mean, a lot of times you look at some of the biggest blockbuster films of all time, like, or you look at, like the Michael Bay Transformers movies, especially early on, they made a ton of money. It wasn't good. And if you made it quote unquote good, I don't know that it would have made the money it did. It probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to it. I mean, restaurant chains tend to not be anywhere as good as going to like a nice little restaurant, but they make a ton more money. And they're, it's, because you sort of know what you're getting. I think that applies somewhat to some mainstream comics. Like Batman Hush, you know what you're getting. You're getting Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee having Batman do a bunch of crazy stuff and fighting the characters you want to see him fighting. And there's just because you're making a story to facilitate that. You're not making like a good story, like from its core, isn't restrained by that sort of thing. You're just telling the story. Like sort of going back to Fritz the Cat, like you're putting this together. You don't care if, it offends this person or that person. You don't care if it's what it's doing. You have a story to tell and you're going to tell it with other things like that. And this happens, I mean, with anything that's like owned by a larger corporation or this and that, it's like you have to protect the IP. You have to tell a story, especially when you're dealing with characters with really long histories, that you have to be selective of what's going to contradict this or that, what's in continuity, what's not, which character's using this character, which character's not using that character. You have a lot of things you have to juggle and make work. So it's hard to purely work on something that's good. You can make the best thing out of that. And like I said, you can, just because I don't necessarily think such and such is good, it doesn't mean I haven't read it or I don't own it or I haven't read it multiple times or I haven't recommended it to people or that it doesn't make money. It's just a like, well, is that ever going to be on the same like critical level as something else? Is it Love and Rockets? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
Well, no,
like
but you make a valid point.
Would you like it if it was, the Love and Rocket style? I mean, that's not what you expect from Batman fighting, Rose Gallery and Hush and all of those people.
Yeah.
In that cool way. I mean.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's that, but like, then it turns into like, I mean, you sort of know what to expect in certain situations. And there are like some stories in like Batman and Spider-Man that like really go in different directions I think are really intriguing. But like overall, and I do love that stuff, and I own and have spent an embarrassing amount of money on characters like Batman and Spider-Man over the years. And have bought original artwork with those characters and all of that. It's it's something I enjoy a lot. But like what you were saying, like I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to then make Batman be a critically acclaimed sort like the answer isn't make Batman an art house film. The answer is enjoy Batman when you enjoy Batman and your big blockbusters and your mainstream stuff, and go enjoy your art house film on your own time. You shouldn't be, I don't think it would.
It's a different genre.
Yeah, I mean, you don't go for a good steak at Applebee's. That doesn't mean Applebee's isn't doesn't have its purpose. You know.
Oh, Joe, you're killing me.
You go to Wendy's.
So it is the fact of what you're essentially saying. It's the fact that people need to understand that there are different levels of media. Now, I'm curious within that, do you think that the fact that the Hollywood blockbuster has been pushed so much, do you feel like it's pushed those art house things, whether it be in comic or whatever, I want to point out, like regardless of what medium we're talking about? I know I said Hollywood blockbuster. I'm talking about everything. Where those art house things are put so far in the back that so few people touch on them that they're left without that. And look, like I just, I don't know if you've read it, but The Body That Was Left by Ed Brubaker, right? I don't know if you've read that. Wow. Lovely story. Very much something that I think if you walked up to somebody and was like, hey, you want to read a good comic? And you handed them that, when they were done, they'd be like, there were no superheroes. What was this? There were genitalia out. There was a murder. This was way too serious. I did not expect this in a picture book. And I'd be like, well, that's because you need to understand that comic books, they envelop all genres, not just what you think they do. But do you think of that mentality as far as how much that's been pushed, that maybe it's driven people too much to want the Hollywood blockbuster and not think about the art house feature?
I'm not sure. It's like, I mean, this is where sort of, if we're talking about like specifically direct market, you know, we're not talking about webtoons, we're not talking about, you know, the book market. If we are isolating this to strictly the direct market, it is similar to movie theaters in that you need a lot of blockbuster style books to exist to allow there to be your sort of more art housey or your indie books to thrive. You know, like you don't get some of these A24 films coming out if you don't have Avatar 2 and Barbie and the Super Mario Brothers movie and Inside Out 2. Like you need, or, you know, Deadpool 3. You need these big blockbusters that get people out there, get people excited to go to the movies, and then be like, oh, get them in the habit of going regularly. And if you're in that habit, you'll maybe try other movies because you're like, oh, you know, it's something to go out do with, you know, friends and things like that. That's what Saga did for so long before the long hiatus, coupled with, you know, lockdown and all of that, kind of broke some of that habit for people. But, you know, it was Walking Dead for a while, and then sort of Saga took the baton, and those became the like giant successful indie books that got people to be like, oh, I like these like non-superhero indie things like Image. And, you know, we can have an argument over is Image indie at this point or not, but that's like a different discussion. But it's like, oh, and, you know, oh, I'm buying these other non-superhero things, these indie things, maybe sci-fi or horror. So I'm here for that. Let me go see what else is in that vein. And it helps to create audiences for these, you know, sort of smaller books. But you need that. It's this whole sort of, you know, like ecosystem of like, you need Batman and Spider-Man to be incredible, to keep people excited, keep people going in. And for a while at DC, it was like Vertigo. And now it's a little more with like Black Label and stuff like that, of like, ooh, I'm still like, these feel more indie, even though they're not. And then like I'm dipping my toes in the water a bit, and then like, okay, maybe I'll try Image, maybe I'll try Dark Horse, and keep things going from there. So there is this sort of parallel, and I think, yeah, we really need that next sort of saga to come about, to really excite people, to kind of help you know, the indie ecosphere within like the direct market.
On
yeah, the mainstream indie.
Yeah, on
the
everything
mainstream
you said, though.
non-superhero stuff.
Yeah, all I got to say is, like, as far as Image being mainstream, I know Skybound certainly is, as far as that being part of Image. Because, like, if you're telling me Skybound ain't mainstream, I'm going to be like, do you realize what Skybound is? Do you realize what Skybound includes? Do you realize what you've already watched that was a comic book that was from Skybound? Whether it be the G.I. Joe cartoon or the Walking Dead, you know, it's pretty, yeah. So that one, I think, like, that particular branch of Image, I think, has gone into the mainstream. And I mean, shout out to Robert Kirkman for pulling that off the way that he has, to where he can make Invincible pretty much as the comic was, you know? So that's just a whole level of impressive. But yeah, Image is, that's a weird debate, man, as far as what is at this point on that top tier and what's not. Because obviously Marvel and DC aren't a debate, you know? But Image is like...
Yeah, but I'm not sure we can actually call the the big publishers indie anymore. If you have like a multi-million-dollar company, that's not indie. We can call them, I mean, a lot of publishers that are today, 15, 20 years ago, were indie. I mean, Dynamite is 20 years old, I think, right? Or something like that. So, yeah.
Dynamite, yeah.
And Boom is also 20 years, and a few other publishers were like 20, 25 years. So 10, 15 years ago, you had indie comics, but now you have non-superhero comics. And indie is maybe, you know, a smaller company like Walt Comics. They're not even also indie, you know, at this point, that indie, like, you know, if you're in direct market, I don't think you can be actually indie. You may be a smaller one, but
well, if we're talking about 20 years ago or so, this is we're right now in a similar cycle to like the early 2000s, when also G.I. Joe and Transformers comics were doing really well.
Yeah.
So it's right now on the indie scene, the licensed comics are really bring people in, or at least attracting the people who are interested in you know, big two stuff, going into the shops for that. Like Thundercats was a huge success for, you know, Dynamite, and you're seeing Space Ghost similarly. They've announced they're working on a bunch of, you know, Johnny Quest, I'm sure, is doing well. You know, Ben 10 is supposed to be coming out soon from Dynamite. They have a bunch of stuff that they're working on. Like that, I believe the biggest hit, I think I read this in a press release, I might be wrong, but I believe that Dick Tracy was one of, if not the, like, that #1 issue was one of, if not the biggest single issue seller for Mad Cave so far.
Shout out to Mad Cave. We've had several creators on from Mad Cave on the quest over here. And I personally am enjoying Dick Tracy, I have to say. Like, I really, because, like, look, I remember that movie back in the day. The fact that you got Dustin Hoffman playing Mumbles, and the fact that, like, how they played Mumbles off in that comic, I like it.
It's good.
It's great. And Flash Gordon, I've been reading that one, and, you know, it's Jeremy Adams and Will Conrad, and, you know, I've been a fan of Jeremy Adams, but you know, and Will Conrad, but I'm thinking more specifically about, you know, Green Lantern and stuff like that coming to mind when I'm saying that. But that too has been really good. you know, and sometimes because those properties have been around so long and they've been done at so many publishers, you're not always sure, like, oh, what's the quality of this one going to be? Is this going to be like the Gold Key, like Flash Gordon's from like the late 70s or whatever it is? Or is this going to be, you know, is they taking this seriously? And, you know, it was Mad Cave, so, you know, you kind of figure, you know, they're going to put the work into it. But you know, it's one thing to think that, and it's another thing to have it, you know, sort of confirmed by, you know, reading it. So you're seeing a lot of sort of success with that, and yeah, again, like I'm behind on Thundercats, but like I've been getting every issue of Space Ghost that's been coming out, and that's been great
I
at
did not pick up
Dynamite.
Thundercats. I need to pick up the graphic because I love Deck's work as far as everything, like what he did with the Time Before Time, and I've told him this. Is literally probably my favorite time travel story, and I know somebody probably hates me for saying that. The fact that I said that is my favorite time travel story. There's probably somebody that loves Back to the Future out there going, dude, right? But whatever, it's my personal favorite. So I'm curious.
No, I get it, and Declan's great. I actually met him in Dublin back in March. I was there for about a week, and you know, got to hang out with him a bit. It was Dublin Comic Con the weekend I was over there, and he was just such a sweet guy. He was very you know, loves you know, Ireland, loves you know, making sure people have a, you know, good time and enjoy their experience there. Like just a really, you know, sort of a great experience.
So what you're saying, Joe, is he was handing you pints, huh?
Oh, I mean, you know, but I mean, this is before we were drinking, but
you gotta have those if you go to Dublin. I mean, you gotta have Guinness. Like,
you know, I'm more of a Jameson guy. I like hard liquor, but yeah, I got it. I did the Jameson tour, and you know, and I made sure to get out of Dublin a little bit too. I saw the rolling Emerald Hills. Don't worry.
Man, I hope you shine. I hope you shine through that wreckage properly. But I'm curious, in what you did in Shine Through Wreckage. Look, I'm gonna say right off the bat, I've never been a big DC guy. I've always been a bigger Marvel guy than I have a DC guy. Like just throughout my entire life, man. So I know way more about Marvel, but I enjoyed the Doom Squad show or the Doom Patrol show.
Sure.
Wow, what a fantastic show. What a revival for Brendan Fraser as Robot Man. Like we won't get into any more in that show though, but it was a great show. And based on that, I picked up the newer comic that just came out recently. But then I read what you sent me, and I ain't gonna lie, dude, I was slightly confused. I know who Magnus is, but like see, now my brain. My apologies, Joe. It goes through too much, and I don't take enough notes. But what's the main female character's name? Help me out.
In that story, Coagula, but
wait, is that character in the show? Because that's
she wasn't in the show. No, okay, some of the other characters but yeah, it's the thing is she was killed off panel about 22 years ago. She was the first trans superhero at DC Comics. You know, a sort of a trans character, like, and you know, there have been other characters that were, you know, shapeshifters or, you know, aliens and things like that, but I'm talking about a trans character in the, you know, very lived in sort of experience. That was the point of this character, created by, you know, an out trans woman, Rachel Pollack, you know, who's a friend of mine. And you know, since they were doing the celebration of Rachel, you know, thought it was, you know, time to, you know, bring this character back, who was very, you know, unceremoniously killed off in a run, you know, a couple of decades ago. So in order to, you know, properly honor Rachel, you know, we made sure to put in, you know, the references and tie it very much to her run on the book. So characters, she created and worked on, like the False Memory, like Crowdark and Foxfur, all show up. The reference to the Justice League tryout, which was in her first appearance, and all of that was, this ties in directly to the events of that run. Having it take place in the Pentagon, because the Tower of Babel's buried under the Pentagon. That is from, you see that through, Grant and Rachel's run on Doom Patrol. So, to properly honor, Rachel's legacy and to do right by, Coagula, Kate Godwin, I thought it was best to really show all of that off, and to not, it wouldn't have felt right to just have her come back. Like, I wanted it to feel earned. It had to feel like the thought and effort was put in, that the way she was brought back was done within the continuity. I didn't want to come in and ignore what happened. So I wanted to figure out a way to resurrect her that made sense within the story and the continuity. Because as tempting as it might be to sort of hand wave some of that stuff and just be like, oh, she's just back and that's it, I thought, it's like, it's still the canon. You still want to like work within that and do right by sort of everyone involved, and not just hand wave things whether or not you feel that they were the best decisions. So that's sort of how it all came to be, and it's really all thanks to Andrea Shea, my editor on the book, Chris Conroy, having John Workman, who lettered Rachel's original run and lettered all of those appearances of Coagula, wanting to come back. Rye Hickman, who I've worked with before, and we were trying to come up with an excuse to work together again at some point, and a 10-pager at DC seemed like the sort of perfect opportunity to do that. So, it was a lot of us working together to create something. And while it's not necessarily the most new reader friendly sort of experience, that wasn't really the point. So,
what do you think the balance is within that, man, as far as when you're dealing with a Marvel or DC book specifically, to make it to where you are paying homage to everything that's been before, which that's a lot in either case. I don't like, there's like 50 years either way minimum, you know what I mean? There's a lot. And then also make sure that in some capacity, if somebody picked up this comic book, they could just read it and it'd be a good story.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 10-page story in this celebration, which also includes the first appearance of Coagula. So you do get a lot of context, from that, issue. But also, I do think people, like, it is now easier than ever to understand anything that's going on. You read something, you're a little confused, you can Google it or Bing or whatever you want, and you can skim through and be completely caught up to date on any given character in a few minutes.
In my defense, Joe, I was like, Kate, is this the interpretation they took with the lady that was an actress in Doom Patrol. It's been a while since I watched the series.
Crazy Jane. Yeah, no, it's a different character. But
No,
like,
not Jane. Not Jane.
you know,
but the one that
Rita,
could, like,
Rita Farr.
yeah, Rita. There you go. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
was like, did they manipulate her powers that much to where, because that happens.
Yeah.
You know, in
Mhm.
translating
Sure.
one from another, because sometimes it's just simply the fact that, hey, that power cost a lot of money to make work special effects
Sure.
wise. Let's change it so it doesn't cost so much.
Mhm.
You know, so initially
Sure.
when I was reading
Mhm.
that was my misinterpretation as far as in that, just because
No, it's
I didn't look up
fine.
Rita's name.
I'm just talking in general terms. I wasn't talking
Yeah.
about specifics about you
Oh, yeah.
reading the story. But like, I do think there's, it's the important thing is to have a good and well constructed story, and that's the key, and other things sort of fall together around that. I mean, the amount of things in, going back to something like Hush, that like, there's a lot of characters. If you're only familiar with the movies, that you have no idea who the hell almost, like, probably about 2/3 of the cast of characters are. Like things like that. So,
Well-
I mean, at some point, it's like, you also can't just keep having a, like, Batman 101 course over and over again every month for everything. So there is this level of you need to, if a story is really good, and if it's good and it's written in a welcoming fashion, I think you can get away with a lot in terms of what you're trying to do with it. The fact that Grant Morrison comics have done well over the years, and people like a lot of runs that they've worked on, when they're dealing sometimes with some pretty out there concepts, it's like, but the story's good, so like
he knew how to package it really nice.
Yeah, so that's so much of it. I think new X-Men, for example, that sells really well. It's one that people go back to a lot. There are a ton of unfamiliar characters. There's a lot of continuity that's going on before it starts that you just sort of get thrown to the lions with, but it works because it's a good story. So yeah, there is that balance. A lot of times you're coming into, like, when someone takes on like a big two, comic run or something like that, you're continuing a soap opera, right? You're on season 60 or whatever, like The Young and the Restless, and it's like, take it away. And you're like, okay, well, but
You just took over right.
Days of Our Lives that goes on since like 1950 something.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there is a sort of balance that you can't be completely, you can't be inconsiderate to new readers, but that's where you write things in a welcoming fashion, because you also don't want to be condescending to new readers. So it becomes a sort of like, like, be welcoming, be open, have maybe point of view characters, but you don't want to alienate the audiences. You don't want to talk down to the audiences. So there's a lot to juggle.
Then I'm curious, Joe.
But it's very hard to make an all ages type of story like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, but yeah, I mean, but at the same time, I think kids are also able to, comprehend and understand some more out there ideas in a way that, sometimes, not maybe necessarily with the big two, but you see some of these properties out there and you're just like, kids can understand a bit more than this,
Yeah, well, yeah, today's new readers, yeah, but 15 years ago, it was a little bit of a different situation,
I
Mhm.
think children
less social
understand.
networks and
It.
smartphones and everything, and it was
Sure.
kind of toned down world. So
But even within
hashes
that,
from that
oh,
timeline, if I'm not mistaken, 2005 or something like that,
but
maybe
even within that,
2007, 8.
can I say just Vlad? I feel like we have always underestimated children and what they understand
Sure.
emotionally, and I say that
Mhm.
because if you're talking about the era that you were before all the social medias and all that, look, it was undermined and they were told to shut up, right? Right?
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to be mean when I say that. Look, that's the era, whatever. And now it's social media, which is a whole other game, and I'm not even going to get into that conversation. But I do
Mhm.
just think children emotionally have understood way more than adults would ever give them credit for, you know?
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Now I'm curious
But
though.
also,
Oh,
I wanted to say one more thing about to
but
connect to Joe's uh, uh, saying. I think actually it's cool when you get into a fire in a comic book and like 3 or 4 characters, and then you read through a comic book and there's like 5 that you don't know, and then you're inclined to like do the research and you're like
Yeah.
curious, like who are these characters? Like that little bit of interactivity is actually a space that enables you as a reader to connect with the publisher and the characters and everything. So I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, and
Yeah.
maybe the people are doing that by design, for
and I
that.
think
Yeah.
you're right
So,
in that, Vlad. It's a good way
Mhm.
to introduce people to other characters that they don't know, because obviously, Joe, within what you did, you used Cliff, and I mean
Yeah.
Brendan Fraser played Cliff. He became a
Yeah.
very prolific character within pop culture as far as what happened to
Oh
Doom
yeah.
Patrol. And then you use Kate, which is a character that, like, I read comics and I didn't know who that was. Right? That's just the
Mhm.
truth of it. Don't fall, Scotty. Uh, but and look, I would have researched it, Joe, but I would have been late to the episode if I did that. So, I'm trying to.
That's fine.
What can I say? That's why I asked you directly. I think it's interesting though, man. From handling that to where you're handling, you got Cliff, who's a very, very public character as far as everything that's been done with the Doom Patrol show. And then you introduce Kate, so you've got that little mesh of here's the character you know, and here's the character you don't. And I'm kind of going to use them to introduce one another. Now, what do you do in the case of Kardec the Mystic, right? Where it is entirely a new concept. It's something that there's just free reign. You don't have the constraints of any kind of past history. What do you find in the writing experience of that is different? And what do you do in those experiences to make sure that people connect with those characters?
I mean, it's just writing a story that works for the concept. I don't think you needed to know really anything about any of the characters involved. It's we make it very clear the life that sort of John Carty and his fiance are living. We really spell it out. We set up the situation that complicates things. We have a sort of creeping sort of antagonist that all sort of builds and builds from there. Again, it's really focusing on stories, telling a good story. I mean, you can't. I mean, if that's not what you're focused on, what's the point? I mean, if you're sitting around going like, well, how do I make who's the character that people know best and what is this like, what are you doing then? You're not
Oh, well,
telling
no,
a
that's not
story,
what
you're
I
trying
mean.
to.
I mean, how do you take it to where, because like I said, you obviously have a character that's known. So people can
Sure.
reach in to Robot Man,
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? So how do you make it to where you not necessarily translate that, but make it to where the character is
Yeah.
highly relatable within something that you're writing, to where the character is completely unknown. Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, here with the characters of, John Carty and Lorna, it was, what's their relationship like? What's their interpersonal, sort of play here? They've been engaged for how long? They're feeling which way about, their sort of relationship, and that's where, you make it relatable that way, and being able to focus on that, I think, can really, help to, elevate a story. You want it to be relatable, not necessarily to everyone's individual experiences, but relatable in the sense that, like, I get that. I've maybe been there at some point. I have friends or family who have been there, and just something that you can connect with and be like, oh, okay, I've seen this before. I get it, and I can comprehend, this situation and how it can lead to these kind of, events, even if they're, done in a fantastical way. Here, it's still a very, common sort of situation.
So how are you going to write that book and then tell me I don't really think in that sort of fantasy way?
Yeah, I don't. That's just not a thing. I've never been big on a lot of favorites this, favorites that, three wishes stuff, because that I'm a sort of personality type. That's I guess I'm a Taurus. I guess I'm aggressively a Taurus. I'm very grounded. I'm very I'm not going to I've gotten at a point in my life where it's like I don't actually have to entertain this, because by entertaining some of those questions, like if I were to answer some of those questions, it would be lying. It would be dishonest. I would be coming up with an answer to a question to suit the situation, and in doing so, I wouldn't actually be telling you anything about me. It would be me coming up with sort of an excuse to answer a question I don't have an answer to, and to me, I feel like it's better to just be honest about that sort of stuff. I spend a lot more time on things that are, more concrete inevitabilities and things like that, of like, what happens after we die, like that sort of stuff. Then like, what do we, what would happen if we did, sort of, wishes and things like that. And that is not to like, and this is the other part of that too, is, I am old enough and mature enough at this point to understand that, and that people work differently, and that's not a knock on anyone who does enjoy that sort of stuff. I am definitely not here to yuck anyone's yum. I am just that's not really how I operate. But if you do, that's really great. And I get enjoyment from sort of, other things. Like I know one of the, questions, I and for some of them, I tried to sort of change in a way so I could answer it more honestly. Like I
And
think
real
with my
quick,
favorite
for
actor.
everyone that wants to, you can go sign up to the Patreon. There's a link in the description, as well as some links for Joe if you want to check out everything he's done. But you can check out the Patreon. All you got to do is be a member, and you can check out all these pre-show questionnaires. You can get in depth as far as, because Joe gave some very, very interesting answers that we're not going to get into because I ain't taking that much time on the show.
No, that's fair, but yeah, like so like a way where I sort of like met you halfway on something was like, well, I don't know if I really have a favorite actor, but what I will tell you is Gene Hackman in the 70s knocked it out of the park every single time. The Conversation's one of my absolute favorite movies, and they just put out a 4K restoration. I'm probably going to go try to see that in the coming weeks. The Poseidon Adventure, French Connection, Superman the movie are all phenomenal performances, and there aren't, I don't think, a lot of actors that could say they did all of those movies in the span of like a few years, like all of a certain quality like that. I mean, you know, we could talk about things like how like every, you know, Jimmy Stewart, Alfred Hitchcock movie, all 4 of those are fantastic. All 4 of the, you know, Cary Grant Alfred Hitchcock movies are fantastic. Suspicion's underrated. North by Northwest is one of the greatest films of all time. I mean, you know.
Just please, Joe, tell me you've seen the episode of South Park where they have Christopher Reeves and Gene Hackman.
Of course, I've seen that. That was early enough in that show where, you know, I was watching it every week.
Sorry.
That was old.
All you made me think of I need more stem cells. Which might say something about me, but we won't get into that.
As I like to say, you know, live and let live.
I think, man, I gotta say for everyone, like, I recommend, like, go check out the pre-show questionnaires. There are so many interesting words to live by. As far, and from so many creators. And, I mean, speaking of Quest, there are a couple that I've brought up specifically to the creators because I was like, that one right there. And Joe, and you're right. No one's waiting for you to succeed. I mean, no, I don't know if I can say nobody. There might be like, you know, 2, maybe 3 people in your life, max, that are looking at you like, I want you to do it. And that's in the optimal situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's in the best situation that you could be in. You got 2 or 3 people looking at you going, yeah, do it. Like, you think people wanted Dwayne Johnson to succeed? I guarantee there were, like, thousands of people looking at Dwayne Johnson going, you son of a so-and-so.
Well, you know, people forgive a lot of things, but they not really forgive success. That's the one thing that people don't forgive that easily. And I'm not really sure, actually, you can't, I mean, you can help somebody. You can open a door, like in Matrix, you know, you can say, okay, here's the door, but the person needs to step to that door. So I think that's the best help someone can get, like, you know, the door opening, and then it's up to you to like carry your, you know, whatever it is that you have inside out there.
So with what you've achieved, Joe, what would be your advice for someone that wanted to enter this industry?
I mean, real genuine advice is you need to like if you're a writer, for example, I'm a writer and an editor, but if you want to be a writer in this industry, you need to set up some sort of, you know, portfolio site. You are better off funding a few shorter page count comics, you know, like 1 to 6 pages. Show your range. If you're interested in doing like, oh, you know, I like superheroes, I like sci-fi, I like horror, I like every genre you want to do, have an example of it. Have it out there, have it easily accessible. If you put enough shorts out, guess what? That's enough for you to self-publish your own floppy anthology. So like that is, you know, that's a way, and that can be sort of your business card. You know, where you're like, hey, I see these editors at these different shows. Hey, you know, I'm so-and-so, great to meet you. You know, if you like taking physical copies, here's a floppy I put out. It's got, you know, 5 stories of mine in it, of, you know, varying things with different artists. I'm showing that I can, because when you work with different artists, you're showing that you can work with other people. You know, if you're a writer and all your samples are with the same artist, that doesn't convey that. Have a portfolio with every one of the kind of things you want to do with different artists on each one. Show that you can work in multiple genres with multiple people. And that is going to do a lot more, infinitely more, than if you are working with the same artist for years trying to put out your 60-issue magnum opus. That is not a way to break in. Maybe you can point to a handful of people where that worked. That's the exception to the rule. And you also have to understand, what is it you want to do? Because there are different things. If you want to work as a writer and have that be your profession, your main source of income, or if that's like the goal that you have to be willing, like, to work on all sorts of things. You can't be, you know, if you just want to do your creator-owned stuff, that's fine. Just realize that's not an easy path to a career in that field.
It's funny,
you know. Like,
yeah, it's funny that you say that, because we recently had Zach Howard on. You can check that quest just a couple back, man. But that's something he said, that, look, when you're working for Marvel or DC, you're doing corporate art, right? Like at that point, it's corporate, because there's a structure that you have to keep. There's a look you have to keep. You cannot just draw willy-nilly Spider-Man how you want. They will fire you. That's how it goes, right? Because you have a certain medium or a certain standard you have to keep up to. That is what they're doing. That
goes pretty much for everything, actually.
And then well, unless you're doing creator-owned things, and then if you're doing things that
even
are creator-owned, well, I mean, but you got way more leeway there, you know, as far as in that, you know, you're not gonna have.
Well, you're inventing stuff from the ground up. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you're
very lucky you have it.
Yeah, you're able to stretch your creative muscles more within that, but at the same time, you're able to, you know, work on Spider-Man or Batman if you're working for Marvel. What do you think the importance is of a creator establishing themselves with one of the big two, before they go off and start doing their own creator? Because I can tell you a number of examples I personally have seen where a creator has gone and worked for the big two, and their creator-owned stuff has done better based on the fact that their name was already established over here. Do you think that's something that's important, or do you think it's possible to start off in your own creator-owned and just run it? Which I've also seen happen. You know, I mean, there's been both cases.
There are no rules, actually.
Fair enough. Whatever.
I mean, it's a complex industry.
But what's your thoughts on that, Joe, as far as balancing that? And do you think it's important to be able to establish your name with one of the big two working on those properties? Or do you think that's something that shouldn't be a priority for someone trying to break into the industry?
I mean, again, it all depends on what you want to do, right? Because if your goal is to focus on like your creator-owned stuff or things like that, that's great, and find a way to make that work. I feel like if your goal is just to use Marvel or DC to make a bigger name for yourself, that, you know, I don't know. I think editors are smart. I think readers are smart. I think they see through some of that. Not for everyone, but, you know, I think that it can, you know, sort of come through, and you run the risk if you're not giving it your all, and you're just like, I just want this paycheck so I can, you know, I want the paycheck and the name recognition so I could fund my own comic. If that shows through the work, guess what? you're not going to have a fan base that's eager to read your creator-owned book. So like if that's a path you want to take, it has to be because you want to do the work. It has to be because you want to work on those characters. You want to work for Marvel or DC. You know, I think their readers deserve that. I think, you know, the editors deserve to be working with people that want to be doing the work, or the whole team does. But if that's not what you're interested in and you just want to do your creator-owned thing, there are ways to, you know, do a sort of hybrid model with print comics and, you know, digital comics, web comics, developing an audience partially organically and partially by, you know, doing the convention circuit, getting your name out there, creating merch, so you can sort of make a brand out of your creator-owned idea. And that's a different approach. You know, and that's an approach that also tends to, you know, be much easier for, you know, people who are also illustrating or at least partially illustrating their own work. It's a lot harder with writers, I think, to take that path. You have to have a really committed art team with you that's going to want to stick it out, and that's tough.
It's interesting.
I have one question. That is, it's not a common question, but it's not, you know, how to break in, but actually it's when you break in and when you're established at some point. It's about career adjustments. So, for example, you're an artist and you want to do writing, or you're a writer, you want to get into coloring, you know. How do you adjust? How do you actually get out of the mold that you have? For example, if I, you know, want to do writing, I have like a huge track record in coloring. You know, I'm known for that. But for example, if I want to, you know, change something or step into drawing or step into writing drawing or something, how do you do that when you're kind of like in a career already and established? That's an interesting one for me, for example.
I know for sure. Unfortunately, the answer is you have to break in again, but doing something else. And that's the fact. You know, I'm not going to get into names, but, you know, I've heard from people, you know, I'm thinking of one person in particular, but like of a situation where, you know, they worked the big two, you know, they still do, but, you know, they did one aspect of the comics and were asking about like, oh, well, if I was interested in doing this other aspect of comics, how would I go about doing that with your company? And the response was, here are publishers accepting submissions. Because you have to, you know, it's easy. It's a little easier, not always, but it's a little easier to go from to be a successful line artist who goes on to write, and sometimes primarily, that's the word. You know, draw to also writing some, you know, and in those cases, they tend to be people who have been very successful at being line artists for years and have developed their own following that they're then able to get people to trust them as a writer.
Well,
as well. That's usually. Mm-hmm.
Well, can I say, Joe, as far as what you're referring to, if they're line artists, though, they're already taking and interpreting the script and doing a certain form of storytelling just within drawing. So I think within that, they already understand a certain structure of storytelling. So, I mean, especially if you're somebody that's highly established, I could sit here and name a lot of names, to be real honest, that come to mind when I think that. I'm not going to run through them. But I think within that, they've already got a background in storytelling from doing the art based on the script that they're told. So I think in that, and I could, like I said, like all honesty, the main name that comes to mind for me, and may he rest in peace, is Michael Turner. I'm so glad I got to meet him before he passed. What a cool, what a cool dude, and somebody that was a phenomenal artist, and I think was also a great writer, and I think he was able to do that because he understood how to turn words into stories that were deeper than the words he were given. So based on that, he could also make a script.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, I think you can expand that too and be like, well, you know, if you were a letterer, you have a strong understanding of how a page is supposed to flow, and you know, the speed of which someone is meant to, like how much time someone's meant to take on a particular panel or not, and things like that, and which is, you know, incredibly important for understanding story, you know, and there are a decent amount of, you know, writers who also learn to, you know, letter, but again, it's all intertwined, and it can be a bit difficult because lettering is also a really important art that, you know, you can dabble in all of these things. I think it's important to understand that. I've, you know, lettered a comic, you know, it was just a self-published one many years ago, just to be able to be like, okay, I lettered something. It's not good, but like I know how this like works, and I can have an understanding and appreciation.
You had a training, yeah.
You know, and but yeah, all of it is difficult and requires sort of different things. And, you know, sometimes you can be surprised by, you know, what people know or don't know about any given skill, even if they've been in comics for a long time, and the other person's role and what's involved in it. But yeah, I mean, I would never discourage someone from learning anything, let alone other aspects of comics. But, you know, it's one thing to want to learn. It's one thing to make yourself a better creator. It is another thing to be like, oh man, I'm gonna learn how to letter so I can make all the extra lettering bucks to go on, you know, and so I can do this on the side while I'm focusing on that. Like you know, there's a lot to it, and you know, and some people do that sort of thing, and you know, and it works out. And then, you know, other times it's like you still have to be good at this to make it work, and you have to be of a certain level before you should be, you know, putting out that you're looking for that kind of work. So
I do. Look, I totally understand that, man, as far as all the different aspects of a comic. And I think it's funny that collaboration is one of the things you put, is something that's a favorite part of your job, to be able to see a group of people and what they come together and make. And it's amazing, and I don't think a lot of people think about the amount of people that it truly takes to make a comic book come together. Look, and firstly, shout out to Andrew Thomas, who's a hell of a letter. And if you look right down here, you can see the logo that he made for the questionnaire, and it's phenomenal, and I love it. And shout out to Andrew for that, man. And he's a great letterer, you know what I mean? But, and he's also somebody that's developing his art, which is funny because from the time he was first on the show, which, look, I couldn't tell you, man. We're 2 years deep at this point, and I didn't even celebrate the 2 years, and there went Joe.
Oh, he's still online. He just... The camera
is. I'm here. I just had to grab something real quick.
Oh, did you grab us some crack or something, man?
No. I just had to plug my MacBook Air in.
I'm gonna have to edit that bit out since we're trying to keep it PG, and I'm just like, so. All right. So my point though, like I've seen him within the time that he was initially on the show from now develop a great deal as an artist, man. I mean, I've literally seen how much he's improved doing art. So he's definitely stepping into that. He's dropped a Rory to the North. But I think it's funny how much people don't think about the fundamentals of what it really makes or takes to make a comic. Because you're right. Like, sure, I think everyone within comics should know at least a little bit. about every aspect. Whether it's, if you're an artist, you should know a little bit. Okay, well, the writer does this, the letterer does that, the colorist does this. You know what I mean? At least have a base knowledge. You don't have to know how to do it. Because if you know how to just make a comic, I'll call you Declan and be like, dude, you're making my brain hurt. Why are you literally doing all of this?
But it does help if you know everything around. It does help if you know how to read the story through art, through script, through letters, through production, through everything. So, and if you're a professional, at some point you kind of like learn everything if you're long enough in the industry, if it's a career, a job, a vocation. So
let me ask you, Joe, what do you think the importance is if you're stepping into the comic industry as someone that's a new creator to at least have a grasp of what all is involved in making a comic? Like, because look, I'm sure there are people out there like, hey, I can write a comic. Okay, that's fine. Do you realize what else you need besides just the script? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with a lot of this, it's like, I feel like there's like a lot of like really good editions of things like, like Batman Year One, for example, that have a lot of back matter, a lot of material, and like actually using those sort of editions as textbooks, like going through, read an issue just for fun, or read all of Batman Year One just for fun, then read it again with a more critical eye, and go back, read it over and over again and be like, okay, why does this work? And start breaking down things like, how long is a scene in, this issue? How many story beats are there? How many? What's the average, panel count? How many times is there like a splash page or a large splash image? How like really break it down? Like how many words are on each page? How is that affecting the pacing? And start going through and being like, okay, this is a sort of like, it's more methodical and there's more explaining. So these are denser word counts on these pages. And then we're getting into a fight scene and we're kind of breezing through maybe 3 or 4 pages and look at like, oh, there's a really like sort of devastating drop in the like words per page for the next few pages. Like actually examine and peel it back and figure out why it works, and then you'll start to understand and be like, okay, well, if I'm going to do a story, and you can't just do it with like Batman Year One, for example, like take different things and, like, oh, I really like, maybe these 4 or 5 different storylines or something, and really do it. Do your homework, break it down, and start figuring out how comics really work. And you can be working on your own stuff while you're doing this. You're always going to want to continue to improve, but actually understand what you're doing. Like actually take the time to understand why you like stuff, or else you'll find yourself being immature, trying to do immature things. And that doesn't usually work. Like you can't just be like, I want to do my Watchmen because I like Watchmen and other people like Watchmen. So if I do Watchmen, people will like it. Like you have to figure out what works about that. And what works about that, again, like if you're too shallow, if you're not doing the work, if you're not really peeling things back and ripping them down and really examining it, you're going to miss things. Like, it doesn't matter that Watchmen's like a superhero story. It's a story with a lot of metaphors and stand-ins for things. And these characters are rich and complex. And what are they subverting your expectations on? What are they stripping down and examining? And you can learn from that and be like, well, how do I take these tools and apply them to other stories? It's not about, oh, let me do another cape thing that's like moody or something. That's not what it is. It's like, it's figuring out these characters, different plots, and that's how you figure it out.
All right. So, Joe, you ignite my brain with thoughts and questions, just so you know, Joe. You do, sir. So, I mean, in thinking in that, obviously, if you look at films, a lot of them have several. I mean, depending on the film, is going to depend on the pacing. You know what I mean? Like a sci-fi, a hardcore, crazy comedy is not going to have the same as a comedy or what's a rom-com. There you go. Sorry, I could not summon that word to my brain.
Sure.
They're going to have completely different pacing as far as anything else. So, do you think people? This is a crazy two-part question. It's going to be really different. Do you think people differentiate between the pacing within comics so much, and then within looking at that, do you think people look at comics like that to that and understand the pacing of it? And even differentiate the fact that, you know, okay, well, this is a superhero comic. This is a standalone graphic novel that's all about a little town where there was a crazy murdering affair. And then this over here is where there's all kinds of zombies and it's a people story. And then this over here is, you know, as far as the differentiation and the pacing of them, because they're all different. I wouldn't expect The Walking Dead to keep the same pace as The Avengers, you know?
No, I mean, pacing's all different. A lot of that's the lettering. You know, a lot of that is in comics, the reading and the details are what, you know, keep people lingering. So if you want someone lingering on a page, that's where you maybe get caption boxes or some monologuing or things like that. Or that's where you're putting your really intricate images. That's where you're really going to town on something to force someone to like really look at it. You know, that sort of affects the pacing. A lot of times, you know, you can do like usually a slower pace, you know, and it varies for things, is like a medium amount of panels on a page, you know, like you're like 5 to 6 panels, because either it's a splash image and maybe you're trying to, you know, usually those tend to be quicker reads, unless it's like, you know, what was it? There's that one splash image or whatever that people share or used to share a lot of, like Colossus and Kitty talk. It was like Colossus just was going on and on and on forever about, like, you know, important topics, but it's like this long monologue in this like splash image. But you know, usually that, or when there's a lot of panels, it's usually because you have to show so many visuals in a page. So unless it's like a 9-panel grid of talking heads, it's usually a faster pace because maybe there's action and there's people sort of, you know, getting a lot done, or there's a lot of movement, and that's why you need all those panels. But yeah, I do think it's something that people could be more mindful of. I think everyone could be, you know, but you have to be mindful of the fact that the word count is the pacing a lot of times. And if you're trying to get a point across and you feel, but it's a scene that's supposed to be faster paced, that is not where you're supposed to be verbalizing that point. You have to find a place elsewhere to tell that. So, like, when you deal with maybe some, you know, like Frank Miller, you know, Batman kind of stuff, there's you know, there's a quick flurry of things, and then, you know, there's times where Batman's monologuing, but when he's doing that, it's because he wants you to focus on, you know, like, oh, well, now, like, you know, Bruce is really, you know, beaten to a bloody pulp and all that, and maybe there's a caption box or something. It's like, it's because the idea is he wants you to linger on that image of Bruce really getting a beating, or like those sort of things. There's a lot of examples you could use, but it is really important. And the pacing, like there's like a superhero book is maybe paced different than an autobiographic novel, for example. Like you were saying, there's different pacing, but again, the
American Splendor.
Overall, the overall the philosophy is still the same. Whether you're doing an autobiographic novel or a superhero comic or a horror comic, like the pacing tool, you still get the same set of pacing tools, and you still have to use them the same way. You can't. I want to say you can't. Like, there are different ways of doing things, but like that's still like your primary mode of affecting the pacing in books like that.
Well, I'll tell you. Speaking of pacing, I noticed Vlad is losing pace. Because what, bro? It's like 5 in the morning over there.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, Vlad's in the future, y'all. Just so you know, over here at the questionnaire, Vlad stays there.
Yeah.
But no pacing. I like to keep the pace over here at the questionnaire. That's why the final question on the questionnaire is, what 3 subjects would you like to cover most? And again, everybody, y'all can go. You just got to be a member of the Patreon. You ain't even got to pay me. If you want to pay me, there's more extras, right? I'm just letting y'all know. But if you just become a member, you can check out all those pre-show questionnaires. But the last one on yours was King Arthur. Why did you list King Arthur? What, did I miss something, Joe? Do you have something coming?
Well, that was my debut. That was my debut YA graphic novel. Is the King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, based on the '90s cartoon, which I watched as a kid.
What do you think of? Because that's obviously something that is what's the word I'm looking for? Ain't got a copyright. Anybody can use it.
King Arthur, Merlin, like all those. Like,
well, I know, but
and
Mickey Mouse, the
Camel of 3000.
Yeah, just the fact that it's free use. You know what I'm saying? I can't. My brain is escaping. The word is escaping my brain right now. Like,
it's public domain.
Public domain. Thank you. Oh my
God. Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't summon that to my head for nothing, Joe. Thank you. I appreciate that. But Dragon.
Okay.
It's interesting in handling those characters and in handling King Arthur, man. How did you think about doing that, especially based on the fact that it was something that was already done, and that it's something in the public domain and it has been done? Look, how many King Arthur stories are there, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, in this instance, it was specifically based on that cartoon from King Arthur and the Knights of Justice in the '90s. So it was sort of a reboot of that franchise. So those versions of those characters, and in that instance, that hasn't been touched in about 30 years. Since the show ended in I want to say '94. I think it ran from '93 to '94, but yeah. So getting sort of this opportunity to like revisit this show I watched as a kid and to sort of reimagine aspects of it, update it a bit, was genuinely a lot of fun, and in a funny way, it's a YA graphic novel, so we were able to make it. It's not adult, but it's more mature than the audience of the cartoon, which was more, like you want your, maybe 6 to 8 year olds, maybe 9-year-olds, like there to, want to buy a bunch of action figures and play sets and things like that. But this book is more for you're like 12 to 17-year-olds, like you're like late middle school into like through high school, readers. And I mean, a lot of people read YA books, but like that's sort of like the target, age range that you would, read up on this. But yeah, I mean, getting to write a really over the top Morgana and Merlin, like, and just to really, let them be these, larger than life sort of hammy characters was just a ton of fun. And, I hope I get to write characters like that again soon. It would be really nice.
So with that in mind, yeah, what character would you want to write this public domain? Like if what is there one out there that you look at and go, ooh, that'd be fun?
Oh, I don't know. I guess like there's I don't know. I mean, there's so many ideas of my own, you know, that I want to do. So it's hard to think of like which like public domain character in particular. I guess some of those like charlatan characters, like the versions of them that are in the public domain, like you know, like your like Phantom Ladies or like characters like that. But like she's part of DC, but I think like the original appearance, those like original appearances are, you know, the public domain. So if you could like do like that version strictly, you know, following the public domain kind, I think that would be a lot of fun.
But here's an interesting question. This is something that I was thinking about when I was thinking about public domain characters. Like some of those are really are like really old, like 100 years old. Like what kind of impact would those characters have if they would be done today? Like, you know, like who would read that actually, you know, and how would you go with them? Because you do have to have like follow a specific route when you're writing and drawing and everything. Like they are public domain, but you have to follow some rules from those characters. So like how impactful would they be opposed to just, you know, go and create their own stuff that, like you said? So those are my questions. Like,
yeah,
you know, just
no, I got it. I mean, I think there's a lot of examples of that sort of thing. And oftentimes it'll be, you know, like how many loose Shakespeare adaptations come out every year, you know? I think there's a lot, and you know, that's not knocking it. I like a lot of you know, these sort of like reimagined, you know, Shakespeare, you know, movies and things like that, or like when they did those books, like it was like William Shakespeare's like Star Wars, like those novels like some years ago. But like
that was nice.
Yeah, but like there's a lot of things you could do with that, with you know, obviously, you know, Dracula, Frankenstein, and werewolves, vampires, and like there's a lot of like characters and mythology and different things that are in public domain. You can do a lot of interesting things with, and you know, actually, you know, I think you see a lot of that in comics. I mean, the amount of comics that will have, you know, again, like vampires and you know, Frankenstein and Cthulhu comes up a lot, and other like H.P. Lovecraft or Lovecraftian things.
I hope I don't make
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, but those are like the blockbusters of public domain.
I hope I don't make anybody mad with this next, and I don't mean y'all, by the way. I just mean like other creators that may have been on the quest, and like other creators that may have a book coming up. But I hope I don't make anybody mad with this next statement. We're gonna make it anyways, though, right? Because that's what we do, right? So, you said earlier, as far as with creator content, you see a lot of things that are essentially we'll say booby books, right, on like Kickstarter, and you see those things get funded, and a lot of the times they're necessarily not good. You know, they're just images that are very booby, and you know, but at the same time you'll see, I think I've heard this said on the show, there are two things that really seem to help you get funded on Kickstarter. One, a booby image on your cover, right? Two, for some odd reason I don't understand, Cthulhu, right? And you could say the same thing with a lot of public domain characters, as far as if you're using Frankenstein, if you're using Dracula, if you're using something that people are similar to, or I mean familiar to, then it helps them look at that and be like, oh, well, I know that character, and that's an interesting concept. What do you think about
Yeah.
that? And the fact, do you think it is dulling creativity? Do you think it's helping people find an edge by using these characters? Or do you think it's not?
I mean, it all depends. I don't. I'm always hesitant to say things like that dull creativity because like people should still be creative. I think, you know, maybe maybe it's preventing a creator from you know pursuing something that would be, you know, more creative or more difficult because you know maybe they want to focus on something that they know is gonna, you know, bring in money first, or you know just focus in on bringing in money. But you know, that said, I mean it's tough because you know people are going to buy what they want to buy. You can't control that, and no one should want to really. You know, if someone really wants that, you know, seventh or eighth Cthulhu cover that came out this month on Kickstarter or whatever, that's their business, it's their money.
Agreed.
And if anyone, you know, it's like because there is this level of, you know, like, are those things necessarily what I'm interested in? Like, usually not. But I mean, if that's what people want, and people are providing them a platform or a product to buy to, you know, fill that hole for them, great. It is one of those things that it can get, you know, kind of complicated or hypocritical or something. Like if someone's complaining about that sort of thing, you know, I think, you know, people need to be like a little bit aware of how they come up in situations like that. Because if like another creator or something like that who also, you know, is doing crowdfunding campaigns is complaining about like, oh, another, you know, book that's, you know, all like TNA or Cthulhu or this or that thing, it's like, you don't want to come off like you're bitter that someone else is making money and you're not, because that's how it can come off. But no, I mean, with any of this stuff, it's like, make what you want to make and buy what you want to buy, because if you happen to have a story that fits that, you know, sort of thing, tell it. Who cares? It's your story. You came up with it, and just because it's, you know, and if it's in the zeitgeist and you just came up with it and it works, great. But don't force it because you think, oh, I'm going to make the big bucks or the easy bucks by, you know, making a, you know, a TNA book to cash in.
See, and that's what I'm more referring to. Like, I'm not, look,
Oh,
if you can take and make a great story, and that's what's there, hey, that's what's there. Look, ask Vlad. Vlad's over in Europe, and you can just go topless as a female, and it's not a problem. You can't carry around an AR-15 on the beach. That's in America, right? You know, that's the difference there, right? And as far as like,
well, yeah, of course, Europe is the boobs, America is the guns.
you know, what are you gonna do, right? Except we love boobs, but you can't just you better keep the clip in and the top on, and that's a whole different story we won't get into, right? But even if you look at like Mother Trucker, I think it's a great example of using that in a satire,
Sure.
which and Andy's awesome, man. We need to get him back over here at the Quest. That's a whole different conversation, though. So I think it's awesome if you can use that and it be intricate to the story. I'm just curious as far as the people that are obviously using it as a point as nothing more than I need to sell this. I want to make money, and they're not thinking of the depth of the story. They're just putting those things in. Like I said, Andy is a person that I can think that has used very sexual imagery for satire and has used it appropriately within the story.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Wagner, who we just had on recently with Vlad co-hosting, as a matter of fact, is an individual that I can think of that used violence at a great degree within the story, but it was used in the story appropriately to tell the medium, and I think that's something that's important. So I'm curious as what you think as people that are creators that are using that, and they're using it more as like, this will make it work, and they're not thinking of the context of what it is within the story.
Well, sort of similarly to some of the stuff I was mentioning earlier, it's like, the audience is pretty smart. They will see through that sort of stuff. If that's not what you're wanting to do, there's a couple of things here. So, like, if you're just looking to like have a successful Kickstarter that makes a lot of money or something like that, like, that's not a guarantee, no matter what. So you still have to put the work in, and at the end of the day, especially if it's like your first like Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign, there's a good chance, no matter what you do, you're going to end up spending more money than you thought you were going to. It's just a thing that happens more often than not, especially in a first campaign. And then you also have to think, what's the audience you're trying to build? Are those the kind of stories you want to be known for? And if the answer is yes, absolutely, why aren't you doing that? And you should focus on building that brand. If it's not, and you're like, I really just want to do this to make money, it's not a good first campaign concept, because you're trying to establish your brand. If you establish a brand later that you think might go for it, maybe you can give it a shot and do it one time if that's something you really want to do. But it also has to be something that you want to do more than that one time. If you do that and it's successful, and people ask you to do more, and you're kind of like, that's not really what I want to do, I was just like that's a weird situation to be in. Then it's like, okay, well, now you've created an audience base for this product that you're not going to do anything else with. They are less likely to return than anyone else. So, you have to sort of be mindful. Like, you're creating a community of people who are customers. You're creating a pool of people that you want to reach out to and remind, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year, maybe more, depending on, if you're like Pat Shand or not, or something like that. You need to get people to come back and buy your stuff. And if you're doing a lot of different kinds of comics, and you only do one comic that's like that and don't go back to it, you're not necessarily going to get a bunch of your people to come on board for it the first time. And the ones that did come on board might not come back for anything else you do. It's just, you have to think about your brands, what you want to do, the kind of stories you want to tell, and sort of figure out how to make that work.
And look, this is why when it comes to blood and boobs, you need to make sure when you use them, they're used in a moment that is impactful. This is why Doug has just used a bunch of blood and no boobs yet. But that's not even over there. You know what I mean? And I think that's a valid point as a storyteller, because you have to make sure those moments are impactful. Because if you don't, then you're not going to retain the audience, like you said. I think that is such a valid point, Joe. Truly it is. There's one. Wait. What am I missing? What did I do? I clicked a button I shouldn't have clicked. You know what I mean? You ever just click a button you shouldn't have clicked, man?
Sure.
You clicked the wrong button.
Okay, no, I didn't click no buttons. I shouldn't have clicked. My bad. I click a lot of buttons over here because we got to make sure all these cats get up. I hope you all are enjoying them. I hope you all have gotten informed about comics, right? But before we wrap this up, I want to know, Vlad, with your exhausted brain, because, man, I can see it. Brother, I can see it, right? You got one last one for Joe?
One last what?
You got one last question for Joe?
What
your brain's
are you
exhausted,
working on right now?
Yeah, if your brain's exhausted, that's fair, Vlad. It's only 5 in the morning over there.
Hey, I shot my question.
Yeah, he's our time traveling quester over here, Joe. He's the one that is never in the same zone as anyone else, except when we had Alana on, but that's a whole nother point altogether. But Joe, it has been a pleasure, man. I definitely want to have you back here over on the Quest for a later period of time. I'm over here dropping things that I needed for the end bit that I shouldn't have dropped. What are you gonna do? That's what happens.
Yes,
Sometimes.
I asked the question. You told me to ask the question. I asked the question, and now we're wrapping up.
What was your question? Let me hit it again.
I asked
think
like,
we're talking over.
what are you working on right now?
Right, yeah. So right now, I mean the big thing is definitely want to keep pushing Card Activistic. Let's get it to sell out at the distributor level. That would be great. I am currently dabbling on a one shot. I'll probably be launching a Kickstarter campaign on in the coming months. We'll see when that's released. Waiting on a cover and some other stuff, but interior art is already like on its way. About like 6 pages already done. It's supposed to be like a 24-page one shot. So that's something I'm actively working on. I should have something announced that I'm working on in the coming weeks. So everyone just keep your eye out on that. But yeah, and I am actively working on a few projects that I can't get into at the moment, but I am working on projects with multiple publishers right now that I'm excited for people to hear about in the coming months or so.
All the time, man. We got people on here. They're like, look, I'm working on something. I can't say nothing. All right, I can't say nothing because I signed an NDA.
You can say actually one thing. You can say it's a cool project. That's what you can say. That's what I say.
I mean, of course, yeah.
For everybody,
everything I'm working on, I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, check the links in the description. You can keep up with Joe as far as everything he's got coming out. Go check out everything he's released previously. It's in the description right below you, regardless of wherever you're listening, because I know we're out a lot of places. Right. But besides that, man, right, what I wanted to let you all know is if y'all have enjoyed this quest with Joe, right, what I want you all to do, man, you made this really hard. It's send a Mothman. But, like, I guess you got to find a friendly Mothman. I don't know how easy it's going to be to find a friendly Mothman. So you might be at it a while trying to find a friendly Mothman to send to Joe, right? But find one, right? And then send them with a big old stack of them old school Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comics. Those were the best ones, Joe. Yeah. You're totally right, right? And Ritter Sport Marzipan? I don't even know what that is, but a bunch of those candy bars.
Oh, they're so good. I love candy bars with marzipan. That's like, I love marzipan.
All right.
That's a really peculiar taste, yeah.
It's not for everybody, but I love it.
I mean, whatever. That's what Joe wants. So if you enjoyed the quest, like I said, send all that to him. Now, if you haven't enjoyed this quest with Joe, firstly, again, I want to know, why are you here? Right? Why? This is the end of the show. It's going on at least like an hour and a half minimum. I don't know what.
Yeah. 2:15 actually.
But my point, it's been a minute. So why are you here? Right? But if you are still here, and for some reason Joe is just driven you slightly insane, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going insane. What I want you to do is I want you to send him every CEO from every major comic book company to sit there and assault him with the question of, you're going to tell us what your least favorite character is, Joe. You hear me? Or we will give you nothing. Because apparently that's what he's offended by the smell of. I don't know how he's offended by the smell of nothing. Joe, how are you offended by the smell of nothing? There's not a single thing.
I'm just like, it's life. You know? You have control of your life to a certain point. You can't stress about the things you don't have control of. And if you have control of it and it's bothering you, you fix it.
Yeah. And you can always go back to Jedi code to, navigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here is one question for the end for everybody.
He made it really hard to do that end bit, Vlad.
Yeah. Why is Gamora?
Who is Gamora? What? I don't know. Why is Gamora? Where is Gamora? Who is Gamora? How about when is Gamora?
There you go.
All right. But I will say too,
That's for the audience.
If you see Joe out at a con, man, and you just really want to make him a day, give him either a Starscream or an old school Cobra Commander 2 from like way back in the day. You'll make his day. Short of that, there's just 3 more things I want you all to do, right? 1, always give it that thumbs up. 2, always get your comic on. Check out the links in the description for some dope comics from Joe, right? Besides that, have a good night, y'all.
This has been the questionnaire.
Where's the link?
Thanks for checking out the questionnaire.
In the link below, yes?
I will drop it like it's hot.
That's another party.
It's cool, man. I love it.
The questionnaire. That is all.